Welcome, everyone. I'm Matt Stanford. I'm the CEO of the Hope and Healing Center and Institute here in Houston, Texas. And welcome to the first presentation in this series this year, the A.J. Weisberger Education Series on Addiction. We'd like to thank the Weisbergers for their generous donation that allows us to provide this series this year. And so we'll have a number of presentations in the series over the fall and the spring. But this is our first, and we're very excited about it. So let me introduce our speaker. A couple of housekeeping things first. We have you on mute for the presentation, and there may be a opportunity that our speaker might ask someone to volunteer, and I will turn off your I'll turn on your microphone if that happens. And then also, if you have a question, there'll be some time for questions at the end. But if you have a question, if you can just type it in the chat, and then I will relay that to our speaker just to kind of keep things in a more controlled manner. So again, just put your questions in the chat that you might have. So our speaker today is Jennifer Slaughter. She is a licensed clinical social worker and board-approved supervisor. She earned her bachelor's degree from the University of Louisiana at Lafayette and her master's degree in social work from the University of Houston. She has over 20 years of experience in a variety of clinical settings, and most recently she worked at the Miniger Clinic before she began a full-time private practice here in Houston. And her presentation today is entitled Talking About Addiction with Those You Love. And thank you for being here with us today, Jennifer. So I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Matt. Appreciate the introduction. And I also want to give a big thank you to the Weisbergers. I did work with AJ and his family, and so this is been near and dear to me. And what I'm going to be presenting on, the skill of mentalizing, is something we worked on together, and I know it really opened the communication up, and it helped them to have more kind of emotional intimacy, build more trust. And so I'm hoping you'll get the same out of this today and learn how to use this with the people you care about. So thank you, Mark and Camille. All right, so here's the agenda. So first I'm gonna talk about kind of the what, why, who, and when of mentalizing. I'm gonna spend a little time talking about non-mentalizing communication, because sometimes it's good to be able to identify how that shows up for us. And then examples and guides on how to practice mentalizing using some of the language. So please don't be intimidated by the word mentalizing. It's actually something we kind of do every day. So whenever you puzzle, why did I do that? Or why does he drink so much? Or wonder, did I hurt her feelings when I said that? So anytime you're wondering how to make sense of what happens in relationships or in your own mind, then you're already showing signs of mentalizing and of being a curious scientist wanting to understand the mind and relationships. You're mentalizing when you're aware of what's going on in your mind and someone else's mind. And mentalizing, another way to think about it, is seeing yourself from the outside and others from the inside. So there's a lot of perspective taking. So your ability to mentalize enables you to make sense of behavior with others and yourself. So this is an example I give all the time with clients. So let's say you're in a grocery store parking lot and you hear a car door slam. And so your attention's drawn to where the sound is. So then you see a man there. He's reaching into his pockets, nothing's there. He's getting agitated. He's maybe wiggling the handle on the car door. He's looking through the window. He starts cursing. And so most of us would automatically deduce, yeah, he's locked his keys in the car. And if you wouldn't deduce that, it might seem pretty confusing. And so here's an example of how we automatically interpret behavior based on someone's mental state, their desires, their feelings, their beliefs, their actions, right? So we can deduce and interpret that this man wanted to be able to drive his car and thought he would have a hard time getting back into it because he locked them in. And he felt frustrated. Maybe he even felt helpless. And so seeing that man become frustrated might bring up a memory of yourself when maybe you did the same thing. You locked yourself out of the car, and when you were distracted, and how frustrated you were, how long maybe it took to get that resolved. And so you can use your own experience to then maybe enhance your interaction. So maybe you go over to that man and see if you can help him. Maybe you don't. So sometimes we mentalize to interpret our own behavior. How could I have been so gullible to loan her money when I know full well she'd just use it to buy alcohol? We also have to mentalize to understand our emotional reactions. Why am I this upset about him not calling me when he's so late? Or why am I so sensitive right now? Now I've been feeling like a lot of people have been letting me down lately. So these are all examples of kind of wondering about your mind and your emotions. So a shorthand for mentalizing is keeping mind in mind. And to me, it's also learning how to kind of become your own therapist. So it's something that requires attention and also takes mental effort. It's a form of mindfulness, right? You're being mindful of what other people are thinking and feeling, as well as being mindful of your own thoughts and feelings. So it's similar to empathy. I kind of sometimes call it empathy squared because it goes beyond empathizing. It includes, because it also includes awareness of your own state of mind. So not only do you kind of empathize with the other, you're also empathizing with yourself. So it happens when someone is curious about the thoughts and feelings of others, as well as their own thoughts and feelings. So here's an example. If you go in and you want to ask your boss for some time off, and so you mentalize yourself and you're thinking, okay, I'm feeling anxious. It makes sense that I feel anxious right now because he might feel put out. But you know what? I can deal with that. I can tolerate that. Now, if your boss unfairly gives you some grief about taking time off, you'd also be mentalizing yourself and thinking, I'm getting really frustrated. So I need to choose my words carefully right now. I do need to acknowledge that this might make things a little more difficult for him, but at the same time, letting him know how important this time off is for me. Okay? So when you're able to demonstrate your understanding of your boss's annoyance as well as your own, right? And then explain your point of view, you're mentalizing. And so understanding your own mind often requires you to consider the wider context beyond the present moment. So, an example, you might wonder, well, why am I so upset that he didn't acknowledge how much work I did on this project? And you might realize that you've been feeling unappreciated for quite a while. And not having this particular project recognized feels like the last straw. You can think back and make a connection with your childhood and maybe connect how you're feeling now with past feelings of disappointments. Or maybe a parent kind of failed to attend plays or events, failed to show up for you, didn't acknowledge the things that were important to you. All right, so the mentalizing stance. Talk about it as a stance because it is this kind of attitude that you take. And these 10 features are really important. So the first one's grounded imagination. And imagination is really important in mentalizing. It's about our ability to get this, have a mental image. And actually, give me 1 second. Okay. Having a mental image of something present to your senses. Being able to put yourself in other people's shoes, thinking what might it be like for them in your shoes, imagining how you'd feel. It also requires being open-minded. We have to be receptive to ideas, opinions, And we have to be open to the fact that our mind can change when we're faced with new information. Curiosity. So that's the big word that I use. If you forget everything else, remember curiosity. It's a desire to investigate and learn. Okay. Minds are opaque, and we do not accurately know what someone is thinking and feeling with any certainty until we ask. So we always need to ask, always stay curious. We want to stay out of certainty. Inquisitive, similar to curiosity. We're always kind of wanting to ask questions instead of making final statements. Playfulness. Relationships can be tough, so it's important to be playful. Sometimes humor can add a lot to a tense situation. Be non-judgmental. And as human beings, we judge all the time, every day, and many of those judgments are helpful, and benign. But when it comes to relationships, that can be, when we're judgmental, that can shut down listening, increase defensiveness. Another important aspect is goodwill. This is the view that people are doing their best in that situation, in that moment. They're doing the best with what they have, what they know. And when you do that, that really allows for some vulnerability and so compassionate. I really like this definition that I had found. So consciousness of others' distress combined with a desire to alleviate it. So understanding they have distress, and then we want to help with that distress. And not knowing, a stance of not knowing. I think this is what I'm thinking and feeling, but I'm open to others' reflections, others' opinions. Right? Again, staying out of certainty. And then impact awareness. This, we can share the impact that people's words and actions have on us, and we can be mindful of how our words and actions impact other people. And doing this without, blaming and shaming, but sharing the impact. So these are all kind of 10 key words and what mentalizing is. So a lot of times we don't really have time to mentalize explicitly, right? We're doing it implicitly. It's more spontaneous, it's more intuitive. We're not really thinking about it. Now, when it's implicit, we're really just kind of guided by our gut feelings. So, for example, when a friend might tell us about a major disappointment, we tend to automatically adopt this expression. Maybe we feel the sadness, we care for them, we might lean a little forward, make some contact with them. And that's implicit. And we're mentalizing them. We're being open and curious, not knowing, non-judgmental. And so that natural empathy you have for others is based on the ability to mentalize implicitly. So if we go to explicit mentalizing. So this is a conscious process when we deliberately think about the reasons for someone's actions. So when you're puzzled, why would she have said that? How could I forgot to do that when I knew it was so important to him? So when you put your feelings into words and you're trying to make sense of yourself in your own mind, or expressing what you're feeling to someone else, that's explicit mentalizing. Oops, sorry about that. Yes. Okay. So this is just a little graph that shows kind of the implicit and explicit sides, as well as the external, internal sides. And in the middle there, you'll see self and others, because we mentalize ourselves and others. And we also are mentalizing thoughts and feelings. So you'll see that requires perspective taking with ourself, and curiosity with others, empathy and reflection. Okay. So when I'm looking at my time, I need to go. All right. So why mentalizing? So the most obvious benefit is it helps you to engage in fulfilling relationships, especially people we're closest to, and we have that emotional attachment. And if each person in a relationship or a family has the other person's mind in mind, that's the heart of intimacy. And when you can mentalize skillfully, that enables you to influence others effectively, taking their point of view into account while respecting their individuality. So children learn to mentalize best when family members are sensitive to their states of mind, especially their emotions. And they learn to mentalize by being mentalized. And it helps develop really trusting and safe relationships, which is essential in developing secure attachments. And so once children begin to develop language, you can begin to start talking openly with them about their own and others' feelings, needs, fears, and their reasoning for actions. And that's going to help them in the long run and help us grow into more attuned adults. So when we fail to mentalize, we can contribute to serious problems in relationships. Friends, family members, spouses, partners are not going to be happy if we're oblivious to their needs and feelings, or if we are continuously misinterpreting their actions or their motivations. And so the catch-22 of mentalizing is that it's so hard to do when you really need to do it the most. And so a lot of times mentalizing takes place after the fact. You know, that's what hindsight is, but we can translate that into foresight and bridge that gap and turn misunderstandings into understandings. So some of the greatest difficulty occurs when we have conflict with the people we're closest to. Because there are lots of different circumstances that interfere with our ability to mentalize. If we're arguing with someone and we feel threatened, like emotionally threatened or physically, right? And we're in the midst of some intense emotions, we're not going to be able to mentalize. No one is. And so if we make incorrect assumptions about what people feel, then we can start treating people based on our assumptions. So here's an example. If I think someone's angry with me, then I might avoid them or become reactive and defensive. That person may then experience me as irritable and aggressive. And then they may think I'm angry with them. And they might avoid or become reactive and defensive in return. So I read that as confirmation that they're angry with me. And the cycle repeats, right? So our assumptions about others, if we're not checking in, can influence in a subtle way how others feel about us. When you fail to mentalize, a lot of times we tend to impose our point of view and our will on others. We might try to force them to comply with our wishes, our beliefs. And when that happens, resentment, conflict typically occur. And so if we want to have more constructive problem solving, each person needs to keep their own mind as well as the other's mind in mind and stay out of assumption making. And so you're able to influence others, but it also opens you up to being influenced by others. And if we can't learn from other people if we're unable to kind of have their mind in mind. So it's also really essential mentalizing in relationships with yourself. We also need to be able to influence ourselves if we want to change feelings, attitudes, thoughts, patterns, or behaviors. And so to do that, we have to know ourselves. We have to be attuned. We have to keep our mind in mind. So if, for example, if we're struggling with addiction, we need to anticipate situations that'll tempt us and steer clear of them. We can't take for granted our ability to mentalize ourselves. Even though we live in our own minds, we don't necessarily always know how our mind is working. We're all capable of self-deception, defense mechanisms, we all have them. And it's common for others to see things about us that we might have a blind spot for. So a lot of times, one of my sayings is kind of thinking together. We know ourselves best through conversations with others. So let's say you're talking to a trusted friend, and you start out kind of feeling upset, but during that conversation, you come to recognize that actually you're feeling more than upset. You're really hurt. You're ashamed. You're resentful. And so when others can see us from the outside, it can help us to see ourselves more clearly from the inside. Your level of emotional arousal is another big factor in our ability to mentalize at any given moment. It goes best when our emotions are not too high or too low. So we have to feel safe. Again, if we're feeling threatened or we're angry or scared, we're going to be more concerned with self-protection than with taking time and effort to. In states of high emotional arousal, that instinctive fight, flight, freeze, fawn instinct takes over, and mentalizing is gone. Because if you're in survival mode, thinking brain is shut off. We can get panicky or furious. We're not able to think straight, much less being able to consider what someone else is thinking or feeling. Another example, when we are anxious, it's not uncommon to read the behaviors of others as anxious too. Or if someone's feeling paranoid and suspicious, they very easily can see the world around them as dangerous. And so this means that we sometimes, when we have strong feelings, we can confuse our feelings for the feelings of others. So instead of thinking they're doing what they're doing because of their feelings, we start to ascribe our feelings. They're doing this because of us. And hopefully you can see how that can become a trap. When we can minimize our emotions, it also enables us to refrain from impulsive, self-defeating behaviors. And also too little emotional arousal can interfere. If you're really depressed or lethargic, you're not going to be inclined to minimize. It takes effort. If you're suffering from clinical depression, it can take effort to get out of bed to brush your teeth. How are you going to have that energy to start thinking about others' feelings or your own? So I'm looking at time, so I'm going to skip a couple of these. But this is important. So when you are aware of feelings, then it puts you in the best position of getting your needs met effectively, is you're able to express what you need and how to solve the problem, what your behaviors, what your feelings are signaling. Like, I don't like it, you don't call me when you're going to be late. I'm a pro at catastrophizing. I thought I deleted those. Okay, so who can we mentalize? Anyone and everyone in any given moment or situation. So here's some examples, hopefully relevant for some of you. Parents can mentalize their adolescents who are struggling with addiction and confusion about their sense of self. Like, who am I? What's my purpose in life? Adult children can mentalize their parents' alcohol abuse and retirement. Maybe they're in a different stage of their life and they've got more free time and drinking increases. The next two are a little stereotypical gender-wise, but a wife can mentalize her husband's increasing substance abuse in an effort to manage his heavy workload. The more he does, the more is on his plate. Our husband can mentalize his wife's troubles with alcohol, trying to manage their autistic child. Probably is exhausted by the end of the day and just wants to escape. Here are other situations where you can mentalize. If you want to comfort a friend in distress, clear up a misunderstanding with your partner, trying to calm down a child who's having a tantrum, developing strategies to refrain from substances that people use to cope. Describing symptoms and issues to your therapist. And don't forget to mentalize your own mind. If we're not aware of our own patterns, it's going to be really hard to understand others. So when? So you can mentalize in different time frames. You can do that about the present. Yeah, I'm getting all worked up for nothing. She's starting to get impatient with me. You can reflect on past mental states. Now that I've calmed down, I can see that he wasn't intending to criticize me. He was just offering another way to solve the problem. Or future mental states. If I don't let her know that I'll be late, she'll worry and I'll feel guilty. So we can transform that hindsight into foresight. And so an example, I know I'm extremely sensitive to criticism and I can get so defensive that I can't listen to his point of view. So next time I'm going to try to think about where he's coming from and listen to what he's saying. And hopefully that's going to avoid another blow up. So you can mentalize about past, present, future, but also you can have a more narrow focus sometimes or a broader focus or perspective. So sometimes we need to narrowly focus on how someone's feeling in that moment. Like, she looks irritated, or, oh, you look like you're in pain. And then maybe the larger context. She thinks I lied to her, and then the even broader about their history. And she's really sensitive to any sign of lying or betrayal because of what her father did. So non-mentalizing communication. When I go through these quickly, don't worry too much about the names. These are some clinical terms, but there are 3 kind of pre-mentalizing states. So if you recognize yourself in any of these 3 states, you need to take some steps forward. So psychic equivalence is what I think is right? People like in psychic equivalence are intolerant of alternative perspectives. Basically, it's like whatever is in my mind is the truth, period, versus this is how I'm perceiving it. This is my opinion. Also, kind of mental reality equals outer reality. I feel bad. That means I am bad. And that means the world thinks I'm bad. And so if you're thinking like that, right, the experience of your mind can be really scary. And negative beliefs, self-beliefs are really all too real. Another pre-mentalizing state is pretend mode. So talking the talk. A lot of people will have the language. I see this a lot in, not a lot, but, with some clients, they've read lots of psychological books, but they're not connecting to the information they know in a real way. This is when people are kind of in this as if mode. And when they don't want to face what's going on, they can maybe start fantasizing about things. And that's what I mean when there's no bridge between inner and outer reality. And this can lead you with feelings of emptiness and meaninglessness. And the last one is teleological mode. So it's when these people have trouble with abstract concepts. So they depend on the concrete world to figure things out. Things are only true if they can see it, touch it, feel it. So an example, if you're not here with me and you're holding my hand, kiss my hand and tell me you love me, then you don't care about me. Versus being able to kind of think abstractly and know that that person, even when they go to work or they take a trip, they have me in their mind and they still love me just as much. But for people that struggle with this, it's really hard. And so it's hard for them to understand their own motives or motives of others. So I'm going to quickly go through some examples of non-mentalizing language. And I think a lot of us do a lot of these. So speaking in absolutes with extreme certainty, always, only, never, right? We want to be more, maybe it's things like often, rarely, sometimes. That's more flexible. Moralizing and sermonizing by using shoulds and oughts. I always call should the dirty S word. And we don't want to be shooting people. We want to be curious because that brings out defensiveness, guilt. Advising and giving suggestions or solutions prematurely. This urgency to fix. A lot of times when we see someone in distress, we want to fix it because we're uncomfortable with it. And sometimes we really have to step back, take time to understand it before moving to action. And we need to see if that person actually wants us to fix or help fix. Trying to convince the other person about the right point of view by lecturing, instructing, arguing. Usually people tend to kind of shut down. Judging, criticizing, or placing blame. Again, not productive to mentalizing, not open-minded. Analyzing, making glib or dramatic interpretations, labeling, diagnosing behavior without really understanding what's going on. I think in society right now, we're doing a real good job of that, throwing out diagnoses all the time. Reassuring, sympathizing, consoling, things like, oh, you'll feel better tomorrow. But don't worry, things will work out. That misses the step to empathizing. Using sarcasm or kind of over using humor. Threatening, warning, counterattacking. You better, if you know it's good for you. Keeping the conversation surface level on safe topics, and so that you're not going into those difficult conversations. And we really do have to lean into the discomfort of those discussions. Maybe we respond passively, not too engaged, or we dominate the interaction. So I mentioned this before, big problem in mentalizing is the assumption problems. What I like to say is because we know people that are closest to us so well, we tend to think that we know what they're thinking and feeling. And a lot of times we're right, but when we're off, we can be way off, and that can cause some conflicts. And so when we make assumptions about them, we can ascribe incorrect motives. An example, you did that deliberately to make me angry. You're not. He wanted me to hit him. He was asking for it. Or I know what you're feeling. So the one thing that all these examples have in common is the fact that there's this slight intrusiveness to all of them, is we're kind of telling people what they feel, why they're doing what they're doing, as if we have that ability to mind read. And this can very frequently lead to misunderstandings, and we can forget how painful and upsetting it is when we are misunderstood. And when we are misunderstood, we tend to get angry or feel hopeless, or we can even start to feel confused as if we do not understand ourselves. Things about the mentalizing stance, those are something that you're going to want to practice. Something else, you can, yeah, not it. Okay. So forget that. So I'm just going to say some things that are not on the screen real quick. So you want to look for an opportunity to praise where appropriate. Like you managed to recognize ... or you were able to keep yourself safe. You want to check in often. Did I understand? Did I get this right? I thought I heard you say X. Is that accurate? So the two hallmarks, I'm going to skip that. So here's some other statements. I think these are cool just to kind of throw out there. So let's go back to what just happened. I really want to understand. What do you think it would be like to let me know that you feel hurt when you think I'm not listening? How could you tell me that you got your feelings hurt when I said X and you thought I didn't care? How did you think I would hear that? When you said that, I had a hard time hearing it. We can become more interpretive as well. And one skill of mentalizing is called transparency. So explicitly stating your own thoughts and feelings while allowing for an open understanding of yourself and others. So one of my favorite sayings is, here's what my mind is making up right now. So like if someone says something that doesn't sit right with us, instead of just assuming or acting on it, to say, okay, here's what my mind's making up. Tell them, find out if it's accurate or not. The pause button is another skill in mentalizing. So being able to kind of stop the escalation. You slow down, allow time and space to reflect, being able to sit with your thoughts and feelings, no matter how uncomfortable, without acting on them. So reflect versus react. Also, there's something called the 90-10 rule. So 90% of the time, we tend to react in pretty patterned ways without much thought or awareness, while 10% of the time, we're able to pause, reflect, mentalize, and maybe change the pattern. And we want to shift that to 80-20, 70-30, and so on. Okay, so let's move to an example where we're going to think out of previous experience. We're going to kind of assess a break in mentalizing. There's some questions here that I added a few questions. So I'm looking for someone that would maybe share something about maybe a parent and a teenager, or maybe adult child and their parent, or a couple, and a situation, where there was a break, an argument ensued. Nothing too heavy or too personal.
Anyone that be interested, if you could put up your electronic hand, I'll turn your mic on. Oh, here we go. Here's someone right here. All right. See if I can get this to...
Yes. Did you want me to speak now?
I can hear you now.
Okay.
Hi,
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. What's your name?
Caroline.
Caroline. Hi, Caroline. So just in maybe a few sentences, can you tell me kind of what happened? What was the issue?
Okay, yeah, it is kind of deep, but yes, I can say before I became a lot more knowledgeable, I would argue with my loved one about, about his drug use, and escalated into, because I think basically I was coming at it as it was a moral issue. That's the perspective I was coming from, is, oh, this is a moral issue, and you don't need to do this.
This is wrong. This is against our belief system.
Yes. This is wrong. You shouldn't. I like, yes, the shouldn't. You shouldn't be doing this.
Okay.
You know better. You know what it could do. You know the dangers.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so that's kind of, and how would you react with that? I mean, you gave some things you'd say. Is that typically how you would react? Would you get highly emotional, or get angry, or sad, cry?
Yeah, I would get, I mean, especially, like if he was high, I would get really angry. And it's like, and then say, you're high, I can tell you're high, blah, and I mean, it's it served absolutely no purpose whatsoever, except just to, just cause unnecessary stress.
Okay. What do you think you were feeling? What were some of the emotions when that was happening?
Well, I mean, I love him, like, I love this person. I love him like he was my own son. And again, it's like, okay, mentalizing. I can psychoanalyze myself because I never had children. And he came along and he likely met my need to mother. And it has
basically. You might have been scared, right? You might have felt protective.
I was scared. I was protective. I was afraid for him, because I loved him, and I, obviously I wanted I
Okay.
want better. I did not want him to be, I didn't want him to be doing that anymore, period, end of story.
Okay. So a question that I is on my other slides is kind of, what emotions were heightened. Caroline just answered that. Identify where you got stuck. She already spoke to that was kind of a moral issue. There were some lectures, some shoulds. Um, so now kind of mentalizing the other person, what do you think he might have been thinking and feeling in those times?
Oh,
Like when you're talking about the
de,
morals and
yeah,
you know better. What do you
yes,
think he was thinking and feeling?
demoralized, you know, put put down on something that for him is it's not a moral issue, it's a compulsion. And I was basically, I was attacking what essentially is an illness, basically. I mean, again, like I said, now that I have learned, become a lot more
Right.
educated and learn better, I
Yeah.
was I was devaluing him as a
Yeah.
person.
And he might have been feeling a lot of shame,
Yes, shame,
and shame
guilt.
tends to trigger more
Yes,
substance use because we want to not have feel the shame, you know.
yes, shame,
And
guilt,
so,
anger, because he really doesn't, he does not want,
yeah.
when we've had previous, other conversations, he does not want
Mhm.
to do that. He does
Right.
not want to. So,
It's an addiction. Yeah.
yes.
Okay. And so, there's the questions, is this an old pattern? Is it a hot button issue? That is 90/10. Is that happening? Is it a patterned reaction? And so then you can think about, looking back again, we're transforming kind of hindsight into foresight. What would you have changed about your response to his situation or
Well,
to that argument? And how would
well,
you react in similar situations moving forward?
well, I can say because, it's actually even still happening at this moment. And
Mhm.
I basically, it's like, again, some people might say it's enabling. I
Mhm.
say it's harm reduction. Now it's like, okay, if
Mhm.
if you are going to use, at
Mhm.
least don't lie to me, because I will know.
Mhm.
I'll already know.
Yeah.
So be honest with me as to what you're gonna do. And then, I can
Great.
make sure that I keep Narcan, that I
Yeah. Yeah.
look out, to keep you safe. And,
Yeah.
that you continue to, you know, get the help that you need. And, again,
Right.
try to understand, because he's had a whole different environment.
Right. Getting to those
Growing.
underlying
Yeah,
kind of feelings. Because
yeah,
in my
yeah,
experience, anyone who struggles with addiction, there's just something they're numbing out.
yeah.
Something they don't want to think, feel, remember,
Yeah, severe. He's
And so
got
if we can
severe
understand that,
ACEs. He's
yeah.
got severe ACEs, and a lot of times it's like, again, we can talk about that. We have basically built more or less like you know, he does feel like I am
Mhm.
a mother, but I mean, it's like I'm a
Yeah.
mother, I'm a friend, I'm sometimes have to be a therapist. I mean, it's like
Yeah, and that can be difficult.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Well,
complicated situation, but I
yeah.
always, though, I catch myself when I start to say, maybe you should. And it's like,
Mhm.
before I get that out of my mouth, I'm like, gee, maybe you should consider, or maybe,
Or
or have
have you
you ever
ever
thought
considered?
about,
Because maybe they
yeah,
have. So you're,
have you
assuming
thought
goodwill.
about,
Okay.
this, just
Well,
like a suggestion as opposed to
yeah.
like more of a command. You should.
Right. Right. Well, Caroline, I do appreciate you sharing and participating here with me. And so I want to kind of say one more thing to wrap up, answer a few more questions and answers. And so, like using language, we mentalize naturally. Most of the time, we don't have to think about it. We don't have to be a linguist to use language, and you don't have to be a professional to mentalize. But it is a skill that can be developed. And sometimes families and couples might need an outside perspective. They might need a therapist to hold the space, to manage the strong emotions, to slow everyone down, and to guide them in practicing those skills. So I'm going to open it up to questions and answers, and I'm going to tell you how. So so I had lost all my slides, also and I had to redo them, and my camera on my laptop broke. So I'm using my husband's laptop and his camera. And I think what's happening is he has a different version of PowerPoint, because when I have it on a little jump drive, and when I pull it up on mine, it's fine. But when I pull it up here, it's the old stuff. It's kind of baffling me. But well, I apologize for that chaos. But I'll answer some questions.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, you can just type it in the chat for us here.
Mhm.
Well, it doesn't look like. I was just, maybe I was just going to ask you in relationship to that first question that someone asked. Would you ever imagine there a time or a client or a situation in which you wouldn't think harm reduction was a good thing to do?
Yeah, I mean, each situation's unique and different, and it's it's always going to depend. I mean, I think if, let's say, you have multiple children in the house, and one child is you know gosh, maybe they're into selling, and so then things are happening in the yard, endangering the life of the other children, for example. Then that might be when you have to think of you know all their needs as compared to one person's needs, and they might need to move out if they can't stop. Like it might need to be an all or nothing.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And it is a very individualized
Mm-hmm.
thing sometimes, just in general. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Oh, here we go.
You're welcome.
Someone suggested harm reduction not an option when dealing with psychosis. Yeah, and that's certainly if
Right.
the person has an
Right.
altered state of consciousness like that, and they don't really
Right.
perceive what's
Right.
going on. Well, thank you so much, and we
You're welcome.
I
Thank you.
appreciate you being with us today. We will be sending out a copy
The
of
correct
the
version. Yeah.
presentation and the PowerPoint to everyone who registered today. Thank you for joining us. And our next presentation in the Weisberger series will be on October 26th. It's on the neuroscience of addiction, and you can register for that on the Hope and Healing Center website, hhci.org. So thank you guys for joining us today.
Thank you.